Hello everyone, my name is Kris Constable. I'm a principal at a local company called Private SecTech. And one of the things I want to talk about today is just privacy and security strategies for your nonprofit. But the thing that stands out, if you hadn't heard about it last week, is two major vulnerabilities. One's called Meltdown and one's called Spectre. So I'm going to explain them and why they're important to you and everybody here. So you might want to have a pen and paper. This is the one super technical slide. Everything will get easier after this. It's just to scare you. But if you have a pen and paper, there are going to be lots of tech tips in my 10 minutes. So however you want to take notes.
Can we show the slides after?
Sure.
Email will come afterwards. Don't worry.
So the unique thing, the kind of summary of this, these are the fun words are speculative execution and side channel attacks, if you want to sound like a hacker. But basically on the hardware side, all Intel CPUs have been affected by this. And now it's come out that also AMD and ARM, which is basically every processor on Earth. So the scale of this vulnerability is pretty notable. The CEO of Intel said today at CES in Las Vegas that starting next week, they have solutions for 90% of the CPUs. So things are going to be coming in as far as updates starting next week. So I'd like to look at the positive things when this is pretty detrimental. So it's a helpful reminder that we all need a privacy and security strategy. So I guess the first question is, what can we do? Every organization should have a privacy and security strategy, and you should be testing it somehow. So how are you validating that every one of your staff or contractors are complying with your privacy and security policies? So the number one thing is patch all the things. So often we're busy working on some kind of document, and you'll get a prompt and say there's an update in Java or an update for OS X, and you say try now, try in an hour, try tomorrow. And I often will see machines that haven't been patched in months to years. So these are two hacker tools that are free to download off of GitHub right now if you want to do some damage. One's called Masscan and one's called Metasploit. And I'm talking about them because Metasploit, what it does is it stores all of the known public exploits, which will include any that come out for the two that I mentioned. But every known exploit on Earth is pretty much in Metasploit. And what Masscan is somebody said, hey, let's weaponize this even further and make it so that it can scan the entire internet as we know it in 6 minutes. So if there's a new exploit tomorrow or somebody comes out with at midnight, if they spin it up in Masscan, they can scan the whole internet for that specific vulnerability in 6 minutes. So this goes to the importance of patching right away when you see the patch. Minutes can matter in some cases, in many cases. And these are almost always automated tools now. There's very few hackers, unless you're an important person, most of these tools are just hacking en masse and taking over as many computers as possible. So there's a bunch of different layers, what's called the OSI model, so I'm going to go through a few of those. But the most entertaining thing is CERT, which is this kind of nationalistic emergency response team. They normally, for every exploit or vulnerability, will list on their website what you need to do to patch and protect yourself. The one that was entertaining with these specific attacks is it says, just upgrade your CPU. The new CPUs aren't even out yet, so this is pretty alarming. So let's just start with the operating systems. So starting this week, but especially into next week, you should look up these two exploits. But there will be patches coming for your servers at work, your laptop at home, your desktop, and your phone. Every operating system needs to be patched as soon as it comes out. The one thing I should say is there's no known working exploits for this yet, but you can bet there's a lot of people working on it just because of the attack surface. The next thing I'm going to talk about is just browsers. So, there's a lot of various browsers out there. I usually recommend one based off of Google Chromium. That includes Chrome or a Mozilla Firefox based. These are both open source, which means if a hacker finds a vulnerability in it, they can actually upload the patch and the whole world can get it right away, as opposed to the few hundred engineers who are working on a specific commercial browser. I personally am often asked, what do I use? As a privacy advocate, I would suggest Chromium over Chrome anytime. But making sure you're downloading it from a google.com property is, I can create a virus version of Chromium and put it on krisconstable.com, and you may have downloaded from a Russian site pretending, google.com.hk or something like that. So Flash was kind of, thank goodness, Mozilla officially killed it last year, so Flash is dead, but JavaScript still exists. JavaScript is going to be the biggest attack vector, I think. It usually is anyways, but with this new exploit when it comes out, it will probably be from JavaScript on websites. Which means if you go to a malicious website that has JavaScript in it, it will run in your browser and then do bad things. So by default, you want to have JavaScript and Flash turned off on every website you go to. So these are kind of 3 tools you should write down for your browser. If you don't have it, they're all plugins. One's called NoScripts. Another one's called AdBlock Plus. It does similar-ish things to uBlock Origin. I use uBlock Origin. And then another one from the EFF is called Privacy Badger. Privacy Badger doesn't really help with these exploits, but what it does is it blocks third-party privacy trackers, so it's a great plugin to have. Do note whenever you install any plugin in your browser, you're giving that plugin access to every website you go on. That's just something that's kind of worth knowing, I think. But by default, NoScripts is kind of annoying to use. What it means is when you go to any website that's functional, it probably won't work right. And that's a good thing because you have to now choose. The responsibility is on you to say it's Facebook, well, I know I trust Facebook, so I'll enable JavaScript on Gmail or Facebook or whatever your regular websites are. But the onus is now going to be on you, but don't let JavaScript run on, if you're going to inappropriate sites of any kind.
Or you could just not go to the inappropriate site.
Yeah, I mean, that's, well, I say inappropriate, not kind of. I think, the fact that we trust any given website, it's like, why do you trust Facebook that some developer hasn't put something in? For example, there was a thing called WebRTC that was enabled on New York Times last year or the year before, so you just never know. Trusting sites is an interesting problem. This is just a personal pet peeve. Mac, when OS X came out, they had a really good marketing campaign saying, forget antivirus and all the security woes of Windows, come on over and use us, we're secure out of the box. Which has actually just never been true. It just has always had a smaller attack surface. There were fewer Mac users, but there's more and more Mac OS X users, and they still feel to this day that they don't need an antivirus, which isn't true. So everybody here, no matter what you're using, make sure you have the latest antivirus installed on your computer, and you're using it properly. So every day, hundreds of new viruses are released, and there's antivirus teams who figure out with the signature what that virus looks like, and they release what's called a definition. So you'll often notice if you use antivirus, your computer's downloading a list of new definitions every day. That's actually just useless at that stage because it just means that your antivirus software knows about all the latest viruses, but you now have to do what's called a scan. You have to scan your entire computer with that new list, like usually overnight while you're sleeping, and that's what's going to compare all of the files on your computer with the latest definitions. So again, don't just let your antivirus sit there with downloaded definitions. Make sure you're running regular scans because that's when a virus is going to get detected. And this is the biggest kind of practice I recommend to everybody. I challenge everyone to try this year. I help a lot of large organizations, and I've never had one that when stuff hit the fan that they needed to restore from backups, the backups worked. So like not one, I've never had that happen. And so as a result, just imagine at some point in this year that you come in and your laptop has been stolen or your server has been stolen. What does that exercise look like? So try practicing a restore of your backups and see, same with your phone even. If your phone's stolen, what pictures would you lose? What access would you lose out on? So that's if there's one takeaway that I would love everybody to come back next year and say, hey, we practiced our restore, things didn't work, and we fixed our process so that when stuff does go wrong, you've got a plan in place. I blog about all of these things on Private Sec Tech, so you can either follow it on Facebook if you want, and I also have a blog. If you have any questions there, please throw them at me, and I will answer on the blog or on the Facebook, no problem. I do this mostly to help people, so I don't really make anything from doing that. This is my email address and my Twitter handle if you have any questions.
Fabulous. Thanks, Kris.
Thank you.